The congressman stared down the president of the Hunters Association. If changing the minimum headcount rules the exact moment Hunter Jinwoo Sung formed a guild wasn't preferential treatment, then what was? He demanded to know if the new policy was a special favor. President Go calmly turned on his microphone.
Yes, it is indeed a special favor.
The room erupted in an uproar, but the veteran politician just smiled.
I will ask everyone one simple question. A strike squad of 20 A-rank hunters versus a strike squad with only Hunter Sung. If you had to pick between those two during a dungeon break, which would you choose?
AI Anime and Manga presents. Before we continue, please drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. YouTube members also get early access to new episodes. Back inside the high-rank gate, the Knights Guild was starting to realize that following Jinwoo's shadows could barely even be called a raid. The strike squad from the Knights Guild could not help but gasp as they watched the magic beasts battle. One hunter cried out in shock. Another could only ask how this was even possible. Could this really be called a raid? The ants easily overwhelmed the undead magic beasts and began gobbling them down. Chomp, chomp. The hunters' eyes popped out of their heads at the horrific scene. One of the Knights hunters stared at the feeding ants and asked whether anything would be left if they kept eating like that. Another answered, devastated, that the ants were consuming the essence stones too. Top-tier essence stones were ending up in the stomachs of Jinwoo's minions. Yerim could not watch it any longer. She sprang into action and shouted that the corpse was worth a fortune. When she tried to retrieve the corpse of a vampire, though, an enraged ant took a swipe at her. Yerim cried out as the soldier's claw slashed her arm and sent her flying backward. She landed hard, rubbed her sore backside, and started to stand. Then she looked up. The same ant stood over her. The beast opened its grotesque mandibles as if to bite her head off. Yerim froze, barely able to make a sound. Just then, Beru appeared and spun the ant around. Exactly as its subordinate had done to Yerim, Beru shoved his face into the ant soldiers, opening his mandibles wide. Scrub! Beru's roar left the ant soldier trembling and unable to meet the eyes of a creature so much more powerful than it. The soldier gave a weak, frightened cry. As soon as Beru let go of its shoulder, the ant rushed off. Beru then approached the dazed Yerim and extended an arm. Confused, Yerim took Beru's hand by reflex, and the ant hauled her to her feet. She began to thank him, but the words died on her tongue as she spotted a faint blue light encompassing the tip of Beru's fingers. Yerim stared. Healing magic. Her eyes went wide. The wound on her arm instantly healed when the blue light touched it. Once Beru confirmed the wound was healed, he turned to scream at the other ants. Scrub! They stopped their feasting and began moving deeper inside the dungeon. Yerim quietly mumbled to herself as she watched Beru walk off. How does a minion cast a better healing spell than I do? Hunters arrived at the school and followed a mana compass to an upper floor. An incredible amount of magic power was being detected from the 6th floor hallway. The leader of the group looked back at the others and told them to be careful. His teammates nodded. At the top of the stairs on the 6th floor, they discovered the source. A man holding a bloody dagger stood before an orc he had cut into countless bits. The leader of the strike squad suddenly found it hard to breathe as he made eye contact with Jinwoo's bone-chilling gaze. After forcing himself to recover, he picked up his walkie-talkie and reported that Hunter Jinwoo Sung was there. His eyes swept the scene before he added that it was all clear. Due to the nature of the incident, a lot of people had swarmed around the vicinity of the school. Parents begged to be let through. Reporters tried to capture footage, and onlookers cried that they needed to know what had happened. Had the police and the Hunters Association not been there for crowd control, the place would have already been overrun. News reporters who had hurried to the scene once the news broke were busy recording footage. The moment they spotted Jinwoo, they shouted his name and called for the cameras. I evaded the reporters and quietly approached someone who looked like association personnel. The staff member tensed at my dark expression and addressed me carefully as Hunter Sung. I asked where my sister was. The staff member answered that Miss Sung had been transferred to Seoul Ilshin Hospital with the other students. I was silent. With a somber look, I nodded and walked away. The staff member let out a breath they had been unconsciously holding. When the medics arrived on the scene, the first thing they did was check on Jinah's status as per the association's instructions. Luckily, she was fine. Apart from the abrasions around her neck and wrists, Jinah had not sustained any other injuries. I already knew most of this, as I was the one who had saved her. And yet, I still could not shake that mood. Jinah was okay because I had arrived on time, but what if I had not? The staff member seemed to shudder at the thought. It was truly a relief that she was fine. For my part, I pulled out my cell phone with a heavy heart. My mother would probably hear about this. Many students had been slain by magic beasts, so of course she would be devastated by the news. I needed to let her know Jinah was fine before she heard what had happened. However, an unexpected voice interjected from behind me before I could dial.
We've sent an employee to your mother, Hunter Sung. She's most likely being escorted by car to the hospital right now.
I turned around and addressed President Gunhee Go with surprise. President Go stood there with a grave expression that matched mine. Even if this was not his fault per se, it was clear that the head of the Hunters Association felt personally responsible for the tragedy they had been unable to prevent. I thanked him for considering my family even under these circumstances, but President Go shook his head.
We are the ones who need to thank you.
17 students. I had managed to save 17 more survivors than there would have been otherwise.
We continue to owe you a great debt of gratitude.
My smile was bittersweet. Regret still lingered about how I might have saved more students had I been able to use Shadow Exchange. President Go's expression conveyed that he had a vague understanding of what I was feeling. Nonetheless, he shook his head, as if reminding himself that this was not the time to get lost in emotions. He had a job to do. President Go looked up.
Are you going to the hospital?
I briefly considered Kwangali Beach but quickly abandoned that thought. My mana levels had not changed, which meant things were going smoothly with Beru and the ants. It was not surprising. It was Beru after all. There was no need to concern myself with the raid. I answered yes.
Then why don't I give you a ride?
I declined, but President Go persisted.
Let's go together. I have something I'd like to tell you.
I had initially declined because I had assumed the offer was a mere courtesy, but I decided to accept President Go's earnest request and thanked him. I followed the president to his car and we both climbed into the rear. Despite the spacious interior, the back seat of the large sedan seemed cramped due to President Go's huge frame and my wide shoulders. The driver, Jinwoo, and I exchanged nonverbal greetings through the rear-view mirror. As the wheels of the car slowly began to move, the president of the association started speaking somewhat hesitantly, his expression dark.
We might have foreseen this incident.
I was puzzled. Did the association let this happen even though they could have stopped it? Before my confusion gave way to indignation, President Go took out his phone to share something on the screen. It was a chart of some kind.
This shows an increase in gates spawning in Seoul over the last 6 months.
The steady line showed a sharp increase toward the end.
The statistics are the same all over the world.
The second chart looked almost identical to the first. I would have thought they were the same chart if President Go had not clarified.
Gates are increasing exponentially across the globe. However, that's not the only strange phenomenon. Lately, there have been long lines of people at the association waiting to confirm their ranks as reawakened beings.
The increase in the number of gates and magic beasts paired with a similar increase in the number of hunters to defend those gates. It was as if they were balancing each other out. Seeing that my curiosity had been piqued, President Go continued, perplexed.
There is a change in the air, but this is just my opinion.
I nodded. It was certainly interesting information. No matter who looked at it, it was evident something was going on. However, there was nothing either President Go or I could do about it right this second. Furthermore, this could have been explained over the phone. There had to be another reason the perpetually busy President Go had taken time out of his schedule like this. I asked what President Go wanted to talk about. The president retrieved some documents from a briefcase on the floor next to his feet, as if he had been waiting for my cue.
Japan, the United States, China, Russia, France, England, Germany, and even the Middle East. These documents are official requests from countries that want to contact you, Hunter Sung. You've probably already been approached through unofficial channels as well.
I recalled my encounter with the American agents from the Hunter Command Center, but did not mention it.
Truthfully, the Hunters Association has no right to stop them. We're just protecting your privacy as per your request.
I listened to President Go without a word.
The decision is yours, but I get the feeling that Korea will have difficulty filling your spot if you do decide to leave.
Instead of responding, I looked out the window. While I was deep in thought, the hospital where Jinah had been admitted came into view. President Go put away the documents. Nervousness settled across his face as he made his request.
We will provide everything you need that's within our means. So will you please stay in Korea?
The Knights Guild strike squad followed the army of ants to the entrance of the boss's lair. Yoontae watched with wide eyes as the ants marched into the lair. He asked Jongsu whether they should stop them. Jongsu answered that there was no way that was possible. He did not think he could even attempt to persuade the creatures to pause the raid so his team could harvest magic beast parts or magic stones. He let out a deep sigh and decided to give up on those. He had a change of heart. Their original objective in entering this gate had been to prove to the public that the Knights Guild was still going strong. It would be more than enough to clear a high A-rank dungeon without anyone getting killed or injured, and without Hunter Sung's help either. What happened in the dungeon stayed in the dungeon, right? Even if they gave the ants credit for taking out the boss, people would still associate this success with the Knights Guild, not with the minions Jinwoo had summoned before his departure. In any event, there would be no way to verify this once the boss was killed and the gate was closed, and Jinwoo did not seem the type to talk about it either. Having reached this conclusion, Jongsu managed a smile. It was a blessing in disguise. But just then there was a commotion among the hunters in the back of the group. One warned President Park that something was coming from behind them. Another said he heard it too. Jongsu headed to the rear with a befuddled look on his face. He could also hear several footsteps swiftly approaching. He wondered if the collection team had already come in, but the experienced Knights Guild collection team would not typically enter a dungeon without orders. Jongsu's train of thought was interrupted by the sight of a horde of undead magic beasts that had not been devoured by the ants. For a moment he wondered whether this was why the ants had been feasting on the undead. That speculation was quickly forgotten when he realized the beasts' numbers were far greater than his team could handle. Jongsu urgently yelled for everyone to get inside the boss's lair. Their only hope resided in the soldiers Jinwoo had left them. The strike squad fled into the lair without bothering to check what sort of horror awaited within. Once Jongsu confirmed that all his subordinates were accounted for, he ordered Yerim to block the entrance. Yerim threw up a barrier using her skill, Holy Wall. Bang! The Death Knights at the forefront of the horde crashed into the invisible barrier. Sweat beaded on Yerim's forehead as she looked back at Jongsu and warned him the wall would not last even 5 minutes. Jongsu knew. The strike squad was already preparing for the inevitable battle they would face once the wall came down. But looking at the swarm of undead magic beasts buzzing around on the other side, they were not too sure of their chances. Jongsu said they would just have to hope the minions defeated the boss first and cleaned up the crowd for them. He frantically turned back to the shadow ants facing off against the boss, hoping against hope that it would be easy enough to deal with. Then Jongsu stared. He knew very well which magic beast the shadow ants were up against. He had heard its name uttered many times. It was a mage with a pale face and a tattered robe, an archlich, the most infamous undead magic beast that lorded over the other undead, just their luck. Jongsu's face turned grim. He still held out hope that the minions would kill the boss quickly and come to their aid. But their opponent was an archlich. The more likely scenario was that the hunters would finish off the undead first and then join the minions in their fight. At that moment, Beru approached the archlich. As he did, the undead magic beast summoned over a dozen Death Knights to surround the ants. Scrap! Beru bared his mandibles and extended his claws. The archlich recognized the black steam coming off Beru's body. If it had eyes, they would have widened in surprise. It spoke the language of magic beasts and asked whether this was the Shadow Army. Beru retracted his claws as communication was established. The archlich eyed the ants behind Beru and asked why the king's army was attacking them. Beru let out a sound that seemed to mock the archlich and pointed at himself. We were chosen by the king. Then Beru pointed at the archlich. You weren't. The archlich raised its voice in indignation and disbelief, shouting that it would ask the king itself. But before it could complete its sentence, Beru appeared directly in front of its face. The archlich flinched. Beru was an apex magic beast created using the life force of an S-rank dungeon boss. Although his abilities had decreased slightly when he was transformed into a shadow soldier, the Archlich, the boss of an A-rank dungeon, was still no match for him. Beru grabbed hold of the pendant around the Archlich's neck and thrust both it and his fist into the chest of the stunned boss. The Archlich screamed. Beru's hand emerged from the Archlich's back with the pendant in hand. Being a former highest-level magic beast himself, Beru was able to detect the location of his enemy's life source. In this case, it was the pendant. The Archlich shook its head and screamed that it could not be happening. Beru ignored the screams and squeezed the pendant. Crack.
You talk too much for a corpse.
With that, the Archlich disintegrated. Jongsu's mouth hung open. He needed time to process what he had just witnessed with his own eyes. It had taken only one blow to defeat the Archlich. One incident in particular had made the Archlich so infamous: the annihilation of the Yellow Dragon Guild, a guild that had once been a powerhouse in China. Their deaths might have been inevitable. An Archlich could summon countless Death Knights, powerful undead magic beasts that also required several A-rank hunters to defeat. Underestimating a boss that at first glance seemed to have no bodyguards could lead to one's demise. In the end, the Yellow Dragon Guild had failed to close the gate, and a dungeon break had occurred. The timely arrival of Zhigang Lu, the Chinese national-level hunter, had prevented the incident from becoming a full-blown tragedy. Now the story served as a warning to hunters about the dangers of the Archlich. And yet, that monstrous ant had killed an Archlich with a single strike. It was a sight to behold. Yoontae shared the same sentiment as Jongsu as he stood beside his commander with his jaw on the floor. He asked if that was really an Archlich. Jongsu answered that it was, like the one from the Yellow Dragon Guild dungeon break. Yoontae repeated, amazed that the ant had just killed it. The other hunters were stunned as they listened to Jongsu and Yoontae's conversation. They echoed the name Archlich, questioned whether it had really died with one punch, and stared in awe. Everyone in the Knights Guild was left starry-eyed by Jinwoo's minion and its ability to kill the boss of an A-rank dungeon in the blink of an eye. Everyone except the talented healer Yerim, who had been left alone to contend with a clamorous horde of undead beasts. The preoccupied healer was dying to know what was going on behind her. Yerim asked what had happened. Her curiosity did not last long, as something else shocking transpired before her very eyes. The undead magic beast that had been seconds away from bursting through the holy wall unceremoniously fell to the ground like marionettes whose strings had been cut. Whomp. Thud. They remained motionless. Yerim looked at Jongsu, taken aback by the sudden turn of events. Jongsu nodded to reassure her that everything was okay. Were the fallen undead beasts revived by the Archlich power? The future had seemed bleak upon seeing the black cloud of magic beasts coming after them. But Jongsu could finally rest easy. He exhaled as elated grins spread across the faces of the strike squad. They were overjoyed that everyone was going to leave the dungeon unharmed. One hunter congratulated Jongsu. Jongsu asked what he had done since the ants had done all the work. Yoontae turned to see what Jongsu was gesturing at. The minions silently stared at the hunters as if to ask what came next. Yoontae began thinking they were kind of cute when they stood quietly like this. Then one of the ants suddenly roared at the ceiling for some reason other than apparent boredom. Skra! Yoontae's budding fondness for them evaporated just like that. Instead, he turned to Jongsu and asked whether this was the same as Hunter Sung clearing the dungeon by himself. Jongsu agreed that it pretty much was. All the strike squad had done was trail after the ants into the deepest part of an extremely dangerous dungeon. The ants were Jinwoo's personal minions, so it was basically no different than Jinwoo clearing the dungeon solo. What frightening power. Jinwoo's abilities were truly as amazing as the Jeju Island broadcast had demonstrated. His minions were stronger than Jongsu could have imagined, and the man who could control them as he wished was astonishing in his own right. Yoontae casually observed that Hunter Sung could clear a gate by simply sending those minions in. The implications gave Jongsu goosebumps. Jinwoo had summoned over 200 minions on Jeju Island, but that only included the ones caught on camera, making the actual count unfathomable. If Jinwoo stayed outside the dungeon and only sent in his minions, he would need mana to summon and control them, so he would not be able to use them all at once. But if he could use half, or even a quarter, it would be so much more efficient than any of the top guilds. Had Jinwoo's guild been a corporation, Jung-soo would have invested his life savings. Yoon-tae recommended that they seriously consider joining Hunter Sung's guild. Jung-soo glared at the innocent Yoon-tae and corrected him. The proper term was M&A. Knights Guild merges with new guild founded by Korea's best hunter. Would that not be quite the headline? Yoon-tae choked a little and asked if Jung-soo was seriously going to push for it. Jung-soo told him to think about it. With Hunter Sung's abilities and the Knights Guild's expertise combined, even the Hunters Guild could not hold a candle to them. There had to be a compelling reason Hae Cha, the vice president of the Hunters Guild, had left the guild to join forces with Hunter Sung. Yoon-tae brightened and nodded, but then pursed his lips and tapped his chin with a finger. He asked whether Hunter Sung honestly needed them. Jung-soo raised an eyebrow and asked whether Yoon-tae thought Hunter Sung's guild could operate outside the law. Even if the minions could clear a dungeon for him, Jinwoo still had to have the minimum number of strike squad members. Yoon-tae's face lit up as it all became clear. Jung-soo explained that they would help Hunter Sung reach the minimum head count, and he would be helping them out. It was a win-win situation, a surefire way to shorten the time it took to perform a raid while maximizing efficiency. If they could not recruit the S-rank hunter to their guild, they just needed to join his. Yoon-tae smiled at the rosy future Jung-soo had described, then admitted that they might be riding Hunter Sung's coattails a little too heavily. Jung-soo chided him. It was not riding coattails, it was getting in on the ground floor. As the two exchanged smiles, they felt tremors roiling the ground beneath them. With the dungeon boss eliminated, the gate was beginning to close. Jung-soo told Yoon-tae they would discuss it outside, then called out to the rest of the strike squad to move before the gate closed. Back in President Go's sedan, I repeated the president's promise to provide me with everything I needed.
Yes, that's right.
There were 10 Korean S-rank hunters officially on record. The association had lost 3 of them, 2 had fallen to magic beasts, and 1 had defected to the United States. President Go and the Hunters Association of Korea could not afford to lose another. They would do anything to keep their remaining S-ranks. If it had been another S-rank hunter, they might not have gone this far. But Hunter Sung was the one person President Go could not lose. President Go's eyes blazed with determination. During his tenure as president of the Hunters Association, he had met countless hunters, including his fair share of powerful ones, but none had made his heart race the way Jinwoo did. His desire to keep this man in Korea was as much for his own sake as the country's.
We will provide you everything you need that's within our means.
That single statement made it clear how high President Go's evaluation of me was, and showed the veteran hunter's fierce resolution to hold on to me. I mulled things over for a bit before asking whether President Go could make it so I could enter a high-rank gate on my own.
Pardon? You want us to get rid of the minimum hunter requirement for a raid?
I nodded. The minimum quota for hunters for a raid was a standard safety protocol. The policy was meant to prevent hunters from entering dungeons willy-nilly and endangering their lives. However, did I, a man who could defend against S-rank magic beasts with my army of minions, really require such a limitation? President Go recalled the events of the ant cave and haltingly asked a question.
Does this mean you plan to raid all the gates your guild receives permits for all by yourself?
I firmly answered yes. President Go did not know what to say. Was this why Jinwoo had formed a guild in the first place? Was it all because he wanted to clear high-rank dungeons alone? There were many strong hunters out there, but none ever considered doing raids quite like this. President Go shuddered as he reconciled the Jinwoo with whom he was sharing a polite conversation, and the Jinwoo who had pushed back the swarm of ants with his minions in the ant cave, a one-man strike squad. Those were very attractive words to President Go, as his biggest concern recently had been the large guilds gaining too much influence. President Go's heart sped up again. As he settled a hand on his chest to calm the pangs, he smiled ruefully as he took in the paragon of health seated next to him. I asked if I was asking the impossible.
It's not impossible.
President Go figured it would be difficult, but not impossible. At least not for Gunhee Go, president of the Hunters Association, S-rank hunter and congressman. Since it was the one and only Jinwoo Sung making the request, there was nothing President Go would not do to make it happen, no matter how complicated, if it meant the younger hunter would stay.
I'll take care of it.
I smiled at the confidence in the president's voice. That was one thorn in my side sorted. I thanked President Go very much.
I say this every time, but I'm the one who should be thanking you.
The car stopped far from the hospital entrance.
Until next time, Hunter Sung.
I said goodbye and got out of the sedan. A throng of reporters had gathered in front of the hospital after receiving word that the victims had been transferred there. Taking that into consideration, Jinchul had stopped before reaching the entrance. It would have caused a stir if people spotted me getting out of the president of the Hunters Association's car. Fame could be so inconvenient sometimes. I shook my head and cloaked myself using stealth. In the chairman's office at Ahjin Construction, Chairman Yoo had fallen asleep at his spacious desk. He slowly sat up, observing the sunlight streaming through the windows. He had felt his eyelids getting heavy right before nodding off. Secretary Kim, Chairman Yoo's right-hand man, was sitting upright on the couch facing the desk. The chairman rubbed the last remnants of sleep from his eyes and asked how long he had been out. Secretary Kim looked down at his watch and answered that Chairman Yoo had been asleep for 23 hours and 46 minutes. Chairman Yoo's hands paused while rubbing his face. Secretary Kim explained that as per the chairman's instructions, he had been waiting with the intention of taking him to the hospital if he did not wake up in 24 hours. Was this because of that disease again? Chairman Yoo dropped his hands, stunned. The eternal sleep disease. Those with the illness fell asleep anytime and anywhere but had trouble waking up. It slowly but surely led to their death. Secretary Kim stood and approached his boss. He said there were two matters at hand. The chairman wiped away any signs of concern, demonstrating why he had earned his nickname, Poker Face. His secretary picked up the newspaper lying on the edge of the desk and politely placed it in front of the chairman. Chairman Yoo quickly and curiously scanned the paper. The front page story was about a gate that had opened at a school in Seoul, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of students. He frowned at the gruesome details and ordered Secretary Kim to make sure the company donated money to the school and the victims' families. Secretary Kim acknowledged him, then turned the newspaper to the next page, which featured a large photograph. He pointed to a middle-aged woman in the shot and asked if the chairman remembered her. The photo was of the hospital where the surviving students had been admitted. Secretary Kim singled out a woman who appeared to be rushing into the building. Chairman Yoo recognized her immediately. He never forgot a face, and he had seen this woman before. She was Hunter Jinwoo Sung's mother. Secretary Kim said Hunter Sung's mother was supposed to have the eternal sleep disease. Chairman Yoo knew Jinwoo's profile inside out, and as far as he knew, Jinwoo's mother was supposed to be lying in a hospital bed on life support. Yet there she was, seemingly healthy as a horse and walking around freely. It finally hit Chairman Yoo what Secretary Kim had wanted to share with him. His trembling hands clutched the newspaper. He asked Secretary Kim to look into it. Secretary Kim agreed. Chairman Yoo thanked him, set down the paper, and softly asked what the other matter of importance was. Secretary Kim looked uneasy. The man had a habit of opening with good news first and ending with the bad. He dithered before resignedly admitting that Miss Yoo had returned to Korea yesterday. And as if on cue, the door to the office burst open. A beauty with an intelligent spark in her eye entered. Jinhee Yoo gazed upon the gaunt figure of her father with tears welling in her eyes and asked how long he had been like this. A camera flashed continuously as a slim woman with silky smooth black hair struck various poses. The photographer praised her through the shoot, then looked up after one last camera flash and called it a wrap. Suhyun Yoo, Jinho's elder cousin and a good acquaintance of the photographer, bowed with a bright laugh and said it had been a pleasure. Due to Suhyun's amiable personality, her photo shoots always had a fun and friendly vibe. Photographers initially put off by her spoiled rich girl image always sought her out again once they gave her a chance. Suhyun exchanged farewells with not only the photographer but also each of his staff members before making her way over to her stylist, who doubled as her manager. She asked if Jinhee had called. The stylist shook her head worriedly. They had already tried unsuccessfully to get in contact 4 separate times. Suhyun pouted at the negative response. Why was it so hard to reach a girl who had gotten back to Korea yesterday? Suhyun had been made aware the previous morning that her cousin Jinhee, who was studying abroad, was planning to drop by. Who knew missing one phone call would cause so much trouble? She had been dead asleep after a nighttime photo shoot when her cousin had tried to contact her, and Jinhee had been unreachable ever since. For a moment, Suhyun wondered whether something had happened to Jinhee. Then she dismissed the thought. Jinhee was the eldest daughter of Moongun Yoo, the chairman of the largest corporation in Korea. The likelihood of something happening to her was about the same as an S-rank hunter meeting an untimely death in a dungeon. Suhyun asked the stylist to hand her phone over so she could try one more time. To her happy surprise, the phone rang at the same moment. Was it Jinhee? She frowned in disappointment at the caller ID. The fool. Suhyun hit the talk button and answered, clearly annoyed. What?
Hey, sis!
It was Jinho Yoo. Suhyun let out a quiet sigh, knowing full well that Jinho only called her sis when he wanted to ask for a favor. She asked if he knew where Jinhee was.
My sister? Why do you ask? Is she back?
Suhyun recalled hearing that Jinho had been kicked out of the house for defying his father's orders to head up the Ahjin Guild. He really was quite useless to her. She told him no, never mind, then asked what was up. She figured Jinho was not calling at this hour to invite her out for drinks. His animated voice came over the receiver.
Sis, how would you like to join our guild?
What gibberish was Jinho spouting this time? A deep wrinkle appeared on Suhyun's normally smooth forehead. She repeated, nonplussed, your guild. Jinho's pitch was even more preposterous than his request.
Wouldn't it be better for you to simply add your name to our guild and have the freedom to do whatever instead of being dragged into my dad's guild to work as some kind of mascot?
Suspicious, Suhyun lowered her voice and asked why he needed her name.
We're short one person for the founding members.
Suhyun asked if he was asking her to join a guild that had not even been established yet.
Yep!
Jinho answered cheerfully. Suhyun could feel a headache forming from her cousin's unwarranted positivity and confidence. More importantly, who was the third founder? Forgetting the fool and his ridiculous request, she was more concerned about who would want to form a guild with said fool. She asked whether he was sure he was not getting scammed. Who else would think to establish a guild with an inexperienced D-rank hunter except a con man? Jinho's response caught Suhyun off guard. He let out a smug little laugh.
You're not ready to hear who it is.
Suhyun pressed him to say who it was. Jinho only laughed again. Suhyun threatened to hang up.
No, wait!
Jinho's frantic plea paused her finger as it navigated toward the end call button. She brought the cell to her ear again with a grin and said she would count down from 3, 2.
It's Jinwoo Sung!
Suhyun repeated the name in shock. Jinwoo Sung? Her jaw dropped at the unexpected name. She asked if he meant the Jinwoo Sung, the S-rank hunter who vanished without a trace after completely ruining Min Sung Lee's press conference.
That's where you remember him from?
Suhyun asked if it was really him. No matter what Jinho thought, to Suhyun, Jinwoo was the S-rank hunter who had put the pest Min Sung Lee in his place. It had been extremely gratifying to watch. Jinho chuckled, and if what he was saying was true, Suhyun understood where his boundless confidence was coming from. Jinho liked to show off, but he was not the type of guy to lie. Suhyun pondered her decision for a moment, then asked if they could discuss this in person.
Sure. Do you want to come to our office, sis? Boss said he'd also drop by later. Ha!
Suhyun excitedly jotted down the address on a sticky note, then calmed herself and told Jinho she was on her way.
See you soon, sis.
The call ended, and Suhyun's stylist, who had overheard the conversation, discreetly asked if she was heading out and skipping the staff dinner. Suhyun nodded as she rushed to change her clothes and gather her things. She said there was someone she wanted to meet. The stylist asked who. Suhyun said she would explain later, but the stylist urgently stopped her and begged her to say who it was. She had to report it to the chairman. Suhyun's father was the chairman of a pharmaceutical company. Her father had permitted her career in the entertainment industry under one condition. She had to be accompanied by a chaperone. The stylist was her father's employee, and her duties included being Suhyun's stylist, manager, and chaperone. Suhyun belatedly realized that her confidant would be in hot water with her father if she left without a word, so she turned around and beamed. Jinwoo Sung. The apprehensive stylist could only watch as Suhyun quickly receded into the distance. She sighed, thinking that the chairman would throw a fit when he found out Suhyun was meeting a man without his permission. Then she thought back on what Suhyun had just said. Wait a minute, who did she say she was going to meet? The name sounded familiar. She racked her brain for a minute, then whipped around to gawk at the door through which Suhyun had made her exit. She's meeting who? Nope, nothing. Jinho chewed on his nails as he stared at the computer monitor. Nothing here, and nothing there, either. All the posts bad-mouthing Jinho were gone, which made sense. The boss had saved the S-rank hunters on Jeju Island, ended a traffic jam by closing a B-rank gate on a highway, and rescued the group of students yesterday. In fact, it would have been odd for anyone to be saying anything bad about him. It looked like even the most tenacious Jinwoo haters were gone thanks to Jinho's efforts and accomplishments, not to mention Jinwoo's stellar accomplishments. The rare negative comments on articles about Jinwoo were quickly shouted down after a barrage of replies. This was good. Heck, this was great. But why? Why did Jinho feel so empty inside? It felt like he was slowly losing ways to contribute to the guild. As he despondently clicked his computer's mouse, the office door quietly opened. I entered, and Jinho jumped to his feet and bowed with a bright smile.
Welcome back, boss!
I gave a short greeting. I was exhausted, but that was to be expected. I had stayed up all night at the hospital for Jinah's peace of mind and had headed straight to the office after washing up at home. Just in case an A-rank gate happened to spawn at the hospital, I had hidden Beru in Jinah's shadow.
How's your sister doing, boss?
Jinho asked worriedly. My reply was short, fine. My sister had tried feigning being okay, but as her elder brother, I still worried. Her doctor had also warned me that her mental shock would have been tremendous and that they needed to monitor her carefully. I hoped she could brush it off soon. She was normally such a lively girl. The only thing I could do now was cheer her on spiritually. At that moment, a woman's surprised voice caught me off guard. Suhyun exclaimed that Jinho had not been kidding. I turned to see Suhyun openly staring at me. I raised an eyebrow at Jinho as if asking whether that was her. Jinho fretfully nodded. That was right. He had already briefed me on the situation. He knew someone who met our conditions exactly and wanted me to meet her. Someone with a hunter's license but no interest in guild activities who we could still trust. Plus, she was an A-rank hunter. Not that her rank was important. In any case, Suhyun's clear eyes and bright smile gave a good first impression right off the bat as we exchanged greetings. I had a question for Suhyun before we jumped into discussions regarding a potential contract. I asked whether joining our guild could put her in hot water with her uncle, and whether she was okay with that. I repeated the unfamiliar name.
She's talking about my elder brother, boss.
Jinho rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Ah yes, Jinho's mean elder brother. The plan had been for either Jinho or Jin Sung-yu to take charge of the Ahjin Guild. I nodded. Had Jinho obediently taken over the Ahjin Guild, none of the family drama would have happened. Suhyun was a victim of Jinho's choices in a way. The rascal had stirred up an awful lot of trouble for multiple people. Jinho gave me a sunny smile, oblivious to why I was staring at him. Suhyun inched closer to me while I was busy heaving an internal sigh. She hesitated, blushing slightly and having trouble meeting my eyes, as if she had something significant to tell me. I turned serious as well. I asked whether there was something she wanted to say to me. Suhyun faltered, then summoned her courage, her eyes sparkling. Can you take a selfie with me for my socials? Inside the executive office of a certain pharmaceutical company, Chairman Soko Yu, younger brother of Myungun Yu, was looking more solemn and serious than usual. He asked the stylist if she was certain. The stylist timidly nodded. He asked if his daughter was meeting with Hunter Jinwoo Sung. She answered yes. He asked if it was not just a different guy with the same name. The stylist admitted she had doubts at first too, but then she rooted through her pockets for her cell phone and cautiously handed it to Soko. One of Suhyun's social media accounts was on the screen. The chairman gaped at the recently uploaded photo. It was definitely the same face he had often seen on the news. No way. Soko stared intensely at the screen before bringing a hand to his forehead and letting out a loud exhale. The stylist asked if he was all right. Soko told her she could go now. Confused, she asked him to repeat himself. He waved her out of the room. As soon as he was alone, Soko turned on his computer to search for articles about Jinwoo. What was Hunter Jinwoo Sung's net worth? The most coveted hunter internationally. Hunter Jinwoo Sung's choice was what? President Jong-soo Park of the Knights Guild claimed Hunter Jinwoo Sung's power was immeasurable. A secret proposal from the United States for Hunter Jinwoo Sung. Experts declared Hunter Jinwoo Sung an investment on legs. The number of posts about Jinwoo Sung reflected the public's exponential increase in interest about him after the Jeju Island raid. Soko marveled at every article he read. After about 2 hours of focused reading, he leaned back in his chair to rest his strained eyes. His forehead had gotten sweaty from intense concentration, so he dabbed at it with a handkerchief. Just as he was about to light up a cigarette, he paused, put down the cigarette, and picked up his cell phone instead. When his wife answered, she said he never called her at this hour. Siko laughed and asked if she knew who their daughter was seeing these days. His wife asked what he meant. Siko proudly said he thought he had raised their daughter well. Chairman Siko Yoo was absolutely certain about this. After all, his Suhyun was pretty, came from an excellent family, and had received a prestigious education. There was not a single aspect of her that was lacking. So even if Suhyun and Jinho were only acquaintances now, it was just a matter of time before they became close. His wife sounded baffled. She asked if he was sure he was the same person who used to go to her school every year to make sure she was not seated next to a boy, insisting she have only female seatmates until she graduated high school. Suko laughed and pretended not to remember. His wife demanded that he stop beating around the bush and just tell her. Suko chortled and said she would be just as shocked as he was when he told her. At the public hearing, Congressman Jinwoo Nam bellowed, asking whether President Go truly wanted minions to be recognized as members of strike squads. Congressman Nam had previously been a chief prosecutor, and he was unparalleled when it came to digging up and shredding fallacies. President Go sat wordlessly across from him. Congressman Nam mentally sneered as he noted the president's silence. The congressman believed President Go knew he did not have a leg to stand on. No matter how Nam looked at it, President Go had gone too far this time. The president's lack of retaliation made it clear the old man knew it too. However, Congressman Nam had no intention of letting up. He was not one to drive his opponents to the edge of a cliff and not push them off. He loudly addressed the officials and reporters gathered in meeting room 3. This ridiculous policy had been drawn up as soon as Hunter Jinwoo Sung formed a guild. If that was not preferential treatment, then what was? There was a rumor going around that the Hunters Association, which was supposed to be unbiased, was acting in Hunter Sung's interests. It was inevitable then that this new policy with its impeccable timing would be a strong point of contention. The purpose of this hearing was to weigh President Go's reasoning, but he had yet to say a word. Congressman Nam could feel victory within his grasp. President Go's popularity had soared due to the success of the Jeju Island raid, but the recent dungeon break tragedy and the controversy over his special treatment of Hunter Sung had been 2 consecutive hits to his reputation. Politics was a battlefield after all. If Congressman Nam could bring down President Go, the biggest opponent of his political career, he would gain the equivalent of whatever President Go lost. He stared at his rival with cockiness in his eyes as he imagined himself on the front page of tomorrow's newspapers. Congressman Nam demanded that President Go say something. The microphone powered on. President Go turned it on for the first time that day, tapped the top to verify it was working, and stationed it close to his mouth.
What answers would you like to hear?
Congressman Nam's eyes narrowed. He had expected an apology, but President Go did not seem down for the count just yet. Congressman Nam forcefully demanded to know whether the new policy President Go was proposing had been established as a special favor for Hunter Jinwoo Sung or not. How would President Go weasel out of this one? Rather than offer some cowardly excuse, President Go decided to rain on Congressman Nam's parade.
Yes, it is indeed a special favor.
It was a short answer, but its impact was massive, causing an uproar among the spectators, reporters, and fellow congressmen. Congressman Nam was the most surprised of all. He wondered if the old man had gone senile. President Go should have either denied it to the bitter end or begged for forgiveness, not haughtily confessed his sins. And the veteran politician looked too placid for someone whose slip of the tongue might have just cost him his career and reputation. President Go's calm and shameless attitude was making his interrogator just a tad anxious. Congressman Nam swallowed hard. Sure enough, President Go spoke up again.
I will ask everyone one simple question.
He had a commanding presence that was unmatched. As soon as President Go opened his mouth, everyone quieted down and turned to him in unison, as if they had rehearsed it.
A strike squad consisting of 20 A-rank hunters versus a strike squad with only Hunter Sung. If you had to pick between those two during a dungeon break, which would you choose?
No one could bring themselves to answer out loud, but the choice was clear. With everyone else avoiding eye contact with President Go, he turned his attention to Congressman Nam. The man also had no rebuttal. President Go smiled, satisfied with their reactions.
Do you still think that preferential treatment for Hunter Jinwoo Sung is unreasonable?
Hunter Sung could outperform an elite strike squad from a large guild by himself. President Go was asking them whether they would chain such a man down with pointless rules and restrictions. Congressman Nam appeared to have something to say, but President Go did not give him an opening.
21 countries, including the United States of America, Japan, and China, have requested information regarding Hunter Jinwoo Sung from the association.
He held up a thick stack of official documents and waved them in the air.
All these nations have set their sights on Hunter Sung. Do you think Hunter Sung would want to stay in a country that's so inflexible that they wouldn't grant this small a favor?
Congressman Nam looked rather uneasy. The tables had obviously turned against him. However, President Go had no intention of letting him off that easily.
I'm asking you if you wish a repeat of the Dong Su Huang affair.
Congressman Nam bit his lower lip as President Go put the documents down, his expression that of someone at ease. The congressman knew what that meant. It was the face of a winner, one a congressman wore when victory was assured. He gritted his teeth and tried to object, saying that they still had to consider fairness.
Ah yes, speaking of, Congressman Nam, you recently moved to a condominium near the headquarters of the Hunters Guild, did you not?
Congressman Nam's face turned visibly red.
Why did you move there despite it being much more expensive than the other accommodations in the area?
The congressman was turning very nearly purple, and he looked as if he would have punched the president in the face had the latter not been an S-rank hunter. However, President Go knew better than Congressman Nam how to deal with a cornered opponent.
I hope you all think carefully about who exactly will keep you safe when another S-rank gate appears on this land. You may be able to buy an expensive condo worth $1 million or tens of millions, but you cannot buy a life.